This is an advertisement by BetterHelp. January arrives with a sense of expectation and change. But real change is rarely loud or dramatic.
It's noticing what no longer needs to be there. Thoughts you keep turning over even when they're not helping.
And when you live with those long enough, they can start to feel normal until you pause and see them more clearly. That's where perspective helps. Not fixing yourself, just creating space to understand what's been weighing you down.
Therapy can offer that space, a clearer view of your own patterns and what's worth holding on to. BetterHelp makes starting straightforward. You answer a few questions and they match you with a qualified therapist. If it doesn't feel right, you can switch at any time.
Whether you're into New Year's resolutions or not, working to better yourself is something everyone should do. And you don't even need to bulldoze your life to do it. Simply use BetterHelp.
BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a qualified therapist. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/restishistory. That's betterhelp.com/restishistory.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Car shopping shouldn't feel like preparing for a marathon of paperwork. That's why Carvana makes buying and financing your car easy. From start to finish, search thousands of vehicles with great prices. All online, all on your time. And when you're ready, your new car shows up right at your door. It doesn't get better than that. Buy your car the easy way. On Carvana. Delivery fees may apply.
Citoyens, bienvenue au Rest is History, avec moi, Dominic Sandbrook, et mon ami Tom Holland. Ou, comme on dit en Égypte, Ahlan Marawaban Mikom fil Albaki ho Altarik, Mei Dominic Sandbrook, Wasadiki Tom Holland. That's right. Our subject today is the French invasion of Egypt at the end of the 18th century. Napoleon, the Rosetta Stone, the Battle of the Pyramids, the Battle of the Nile. Tom Holland, this is the best subject we've done since Alexander the Great, isn't it?
I'm still reeling from your
Multilingual.
Your yeah.
Multilingual.
I mean, I've had so much grief for my frankly brilliant impression of Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
And you've got
quite rightly.
That was shocking.
You got two different. You got what? I am very much. I'm not parochial. I'm not
right.
Introverted. I'm talking to our international audience, to our French and Arabic listeners, and just giving them a little nod that we're not all, Wiltshire and Stonehenge. That some of us are very outward-looking citizens of the world. Yes. That's definitely how I see myself,
Napoleon,
and how I think I'm seen.
Yes. Okay. So today's episode is on one of the most brilliant episodes, not just in the Napoleonic Wars, but I mean, it's one of the great stories of history. How Napoleon. I mean, he invades Egypt, a 2,000-mile trip across the Mediterranean, dodging the Royal Navy and so on. And it's brilliant both in itself, but also because it opens the floodgates for study of Egyptology. And in a way, it's the kind of primal start, isn't it, for the relationship of Islam with the modern West.
So, Tom, let's take up the story. We are in the late 1790s. Napoleon is not yet 30. I mean, that's one of the extraordinary things. It's a bit like Alexander, isn't it? So much about this story is actually a self-conscious reenactment of Alexander's conquest of Egypt. So Napoleon, he's from Corsica. He has distinguished himself kind of with his whiff of grape shot in the service of the Directory, who are running France after the sort of the backlash against Robespierre.
And before the whiff of grape shot, he has saved Toulon, which is the kind of major French naval base on the South Mediterranean coast.
That's right.
And he has he saved it from a kind of a royalist British takeover. He's seen that off. A character called Sidney Smith, in the process of evacuation, has blown up part of the arsenal. So he's a figure who will reappear. But this is one Napoleon so much kudos that he ends up being given command of the revolutionary army that then invades Italy.
Exactly. That's where he really makes his name, isn't it? With the army of Italy. So this is the late 1790s. He wins battle after battle.
And that's David's painting, isn't it? Of him looking dashing and heroic on a horse, crossing the Alps.
Exactly. So after a very rough time for France, suddenly they found this dashing, swashbuckling hero whose Frenchness actually is slightly ambiguous because, of course, he's from Corsica. But Napoleon gives them something they haven't really had during the days of the kind of endless sort of revolution eating itself, Madame Guillotine stuff, which is a genuinely dashing, handsome, swashbuckling, youthful hero. And that's what David puts in his paintings. And Napoleon gets all this loot. I mean, Napoleon is incredibly corrupt right from the beginning. He basically amasses tons of loot. So he's suddenly very rich. He's very famous. He's a celebrity. And the Directory love him. The Directory are basically using him as their...
But
they do. You're right.
Also quite,
because they're starting to get worried, aren't they?
They're quite keen to get rid of him because they can sense that this is a man in a hurry and on the make.
So their first scheme for him is Britain.
Yes.
They talk about invading Britain, don't they? Talleyrand, who is the foreign minister. He and Napoleon are very keen on this idea of invading Britain. But basically, Napoleon says eventually, no go. It's going to be much too tricky. But it's one of these great invasion scares in Britain at the end of the 1790s.
So they go for the obvious alternative. So why cross, 20 miles of the Channel when you can cross 2,000 miles and go to Egypt? And so
but there's an anti-British... Yeah, go on,
absolutely
Tom.
is. And so in a way, this is taking the war to Britain because Egypt has become strategically key because of the emergent British Empire in India. And this is what's grumbling on in India at the moment is actually Arthur Wellesley fighting, so the future Duke of Wellington, fighting Tipu Sultan in Mysore. And it's becoming clear that, basically, it's been clear ever since the 7 Years' War when France was roundly defeated, lost its holdings in Canada, lost its holdings in India, that Britain now has a kind of global grip that the French are obviously slightly envious of. And so Egypt becomes the target, both because it will frustrate British links with India, but also, I think, because the French see North Africa as kind of their backyard.
They do. They've sort of been thinking about expanding into the Mediterranean. And we talked before in a couple of our podcasts about how during the French Revolution and the sort of late, it's the sort of late period Enlightenment, there is this extraordinary romance of Greece and Rome and this fascination with the classical world and classical antecedents. And Napoleon has already been pictured as a kind of Roman figure, hasn't he? I mean, crossing the Alps is quite kind of Hannibal-like behaviour. And clearly, right from the start, the idea of as soon as the idea of an invasion of Egypt is mooted, people are thinking, just like Alexander the Great, and this is going back to the Romans.
So
that's in their minds.
Talleyrand, who is such a kind of Peter Mandelson cubed, kind of brilliantly subtle, clever, manipulative survivor, constantly being knocked down, constantly coming back. He'd been a royalist, he becomes a Republican, he ends up a royalist again. I mean, it's kind of astonishing record. But he said Egypt was a province of the Roman Republic. She must become a province of the French Republic. But I think on top of that, what is also bubbling away here is the idea that actually Egypt is much older than Greece or Rome. And that if you want to study the real roots of culture, of civilization, it's not enough to go to Rome. It's not enough to go to Athens. You've actually got to go to Egypt. And it's still pretty much terra incognita. People have started going there, but there's a sense that there are vast, vast treasures just waiting to be found. And so I think that also is absolutely a part of it.
Well, they don't. Yeah, that's one thing, sort of imaginative leap you have to make. They don't know what we know. So you're right. There are not the detailed descriptions and pictures of Egyptian antiquities that we're all familiar with, that British or indeed children anywhere in the world grow up with these days. So there's a real sense of this is not just it's an amazing story because it's not just an invasion. It's not just a blow against the British. It's a genuine voyage of discovery. And that's why Napoleon assembles
151 savant kind of intellectuals.
Yeah. So it's not just he's got tens of thousands of troops and the fleet. He's got all these boffins to come with him.
And a hot air balloon.
And they are... I didn't read... Where's the hot air balloon? I didn't hear.
There's a Montgolfier hot air balloon he takes.
Does it go up? Do they use it?
They launch it in Cairo and everyone's very impressed. And they take a load of printing presses, including one, the only Arabic printing press in the whole of Europe. Do you know where that was?
Salisbury.
No, it was the Vatican, brilliantly. So it got nicked from the Vatican when he occupied
I did not
Rome.
know that. But he's also, they've got a plan. They know that there was once, because of this thing about India, they know, or they think they know, that there was once a canal, don't they? Going across the Suez Canal. And they are thinking, well, if we can do something like that and find out where it was, then that will give us a massive advantage over the British. We can get to India and we'll control, the sort of hinge of Eurasia, basically.
Yeah, so it's geopolitical, it's colonialist, it's romantic, it's personal for Napoleon. He wants to become the new Alexander. It's political for the Directory. They want to get rid of this overambitious general. It is also that it's still kind of, I think, warmed by the embers of revolutionary fervour. So, there's this guy, Dominic Arago, who says he lists the reasons why the French should go to Egypt. And he says it's to offer a succouring hand to an unhappy people, to free them from the brutalizing yoke under which they have grown for centuries, and finally to endow them without delay with all the benefits of European civilization, which is nice. So there is this sense that the French, when they go there, see themselves as kind of the embodiments of the future.
Well,
they're bringing liberty, they're bringing enlightenment.
I'm sure you've got it, Tom, but when they embark at Toulon on the 19th of May, 1798, Bonaparte gives this extraordinary address to his troops. Soldiers, he says, you're one of the wings of the French army. You've made war on the mountains, on the plains, and the cities. It remains for you to fight on the seas. The Roman legions that you sometimes imitated but no longer equalled fought Carthage now on this same sea and now on the plains of Zama. Soldiers, sailors, you've been neglected until this day. Today the greatest concern of the Republic is for you. The genius of liberty, which made you at her birth the arbiter of Europe, wants to be the genius of the seas and of the furthest nations. So you've got so much going on there.
There's a lot going on there.
But all that stuff about Carthage and Zama and stuff. I mean, it's great.
So Carthage is Britain.
Yes, clearly.
The commercial naval power.
Right.
Who must be destroyed.
They care only for money and killing children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But also the idea of liberating Egypt, which is, it's supposedly a province of the Ottoman Empire, but effectively it's ruled by the Mamelukes, who are this kind of incredible dynasty of slaves who get bought in, mainly from the Caucasus.
Well, they weren't slaves recently, were they? I mean, they were slaves hundreds of years earlier, presumably.
No, but they continue to buy them.
Do they still buy them?
Yes, so they get bought in and they live as slaves as children, and they're kind of raised to become Mamelukes. And then I think when they kind of sprout a beard or something, and they've done their military training, then they're elevated to basically they kind of become free. Yeah. But I mean, it's kind of very odd. You serve your apprenticeship as a slave and then you end up as a kind of ruler of Egypt. And that is, that's a tradition that goes back to the 13th century. That they defeat the Mongols, kind of one of the great decisive battles in world history. But before that, they had defeated the crusade of Louis VII. Right. Which is a kind of precursor.
So the French have got unfinished business, haven't they, basically?
There's an incredible kind of snarl of weird historical parallels, echoes, inspirations going on here. And it's just incredibly Napoleonic. And one of the reasons why Napoleon is such an amazing figure is that he kind of surfs the waves of all these kind of different trends and ideas, and does it with such kind of self-confidence that he gets the world to accept him on his own estimation.
Absolutely. It's because he has that sense that great historical characters, I mean, I don't know, Alexander, Churchill, let's say, has this too, that he is a figure in history. Napoleon has it from a very young age, and certainly when he sails to Egypt, he's consciously reenacting classical precedents, and he thinks he's writing an entirely new chapter in world history. And he is. Well, as he does. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So he makes a promise right from the beginning, doesn't he? He basically pretty much before I think he even lands in Alexandria, there's obviously this issue that all his campaigns so far have been against other European Christian nations. So this is the first time they are they are going, they're not just going to an unknown land, they're going to a Muslim land. And that gives it a real edge that it hasn't had.
So Napoleon is always issuing these kind of streams of announcements to the Egyptians in this kind of ludicrously cod Quranic language. I remember it's kind of in the wake of 9/11, there was a real trend for Western politicians to do all that, peace be upon him and God the All-Merciful and all that kind of stuff. And Napoleon...
So Napoleon is George W. Bush
is really the first Western leader who does this. So there's loads of kind of, have we not for centuries been the friends of the Grand Seigneur? May God accomplish his desires and the enemy of his enemies. I mean, it's so great. Yeah. And then when he actually gets to Cairo, he has this, and he's talking to an imam and he, glory to Allah, there is no God but God. Muhammad is his prophet and I am one of his friends.
That's great.
And I don't think anyone is really fooled by this.
But he says at one point, doesn't he, I want you to tell the people, he says, Qadis, sheikhs, imams, chobadjis, and notables of the nation, I ask you to tell the people that we are the true friends of the Muslims. Wasn't it us who destroyed the Knights of Malta? Wasn't it us who destroyed the Pope, who used to say that he had a duty to make war on Muslims? Wasn't it us who have all times been friends to the great Lord and enemies to his enemies? I mean, does anybody believe this, Tom? The stuff about, I'm the enemy of the Pope, I love Allah. Is this all, I mean, does everybody see through it, do you think?
Well, I think, yes, I think basically people do see through it. I mean, in private, Napoleon is much, I mean, he takes the Quran with him. He takes his library with him. Herodotus, all kinds of stuff. And he categorizes it under various different labels. And he catalogues the Quran, not under religion, but under politics, which I think kind of gives you a kind of indication as to how he's reading this. And in private conversation, he's absolutely upfront. He kind of says, we must lull this fanaticism, we must kind of lull it to sleep, so that we can then eradicate it. So he is very, in private, self-consciously feeling that he's going there as a servant of the Enlightenment. But in public, he is talking about being, the friend of Islam. And I think that to a degree, he's kind of kidding himself. And I think that this is one of the reasons why it's such an interesting topic going into the present day, because I think he does feel that that the Enlightenment and the ideals of the French Revolution provide a kind of neutral place where people who have emancipated themselves from Christianity can be neutral between Christianity and Islam and superior to both. And this becomes kind of the controlling conceit, really, of French secularism right the way up into the present day. The idea that the French secular revolutionary state is superior to and can absorb into its fabric kind of different cultures, different civilizations. Yeah,
that's very familiar, isn't it? But let's part that for a second. We get back into the sacral and the secular. Very
can't wait.
Familiar topics to some in the second half. So they land in sort of Alexandria. They march across the desert towards Cairo, and basically they're about 9 miles from the Great Pyramid from Giza when they meet the Mamluk army. And this is one of these, almost science fiction moments in history where you have a very, very modern, well-trained, well-equipped European army facing a Mamluk army that basically is technologically much more backward, that is doing kind of mad cavalry charges towards guns and stuff like that.
But has not helped itself by having divided itself in two. Because there are effectively two Mamluk leaders, and one of the armies ends up on the wrong side of the Nile.
Yeah, 40,000 of the Mamluks don't even get to the battle. So it's kind of crazy.
But it's such a kind of dramatic setting that you've got the great citadel built by Saladin of Cairo across the Nile on the left side as the French facing it, and in the distance there are arguments about whether they could actually have seen the pyramids.
Supposedly they couldn't see the pyramids, but in all the paintings. Yeah. Every painting that's done of the battle, because of course there's tons of paintings of the Battle of the Pyramids, and in all of them they're basically fighting in the shadow of the pyramids, aren't they? I mean, they might as well have been hiding behind the pyramids.
Thing from Napoleon that soldiers 40 centuries of history look down upon you, and again, people have the assumption has been that this is retrospective, but actually apparently there's a letter that was written the day after the battle that basically implies Napoleon did say So there's a very kind of histrionic, self-conscious sense that this is an amazing place for a civilizational battle. And of course, Napoleon wins it, and he occupies Cairo. The Mamluks retreat down the Nile, and Napoleon sends...
they retreat up the Nile, surely.
Yeah, up the Nile, under a very distinguished general called Desai, who pursues the Mamluks up the Nile. And again, just kind of looking ahead to when we come on to the Egyptology bit, they take various savants with them as they go up the Nile to pursue them. But Napoleon is now in charge of Cairo, and it's all looking good.
But at this point... But then,
hooray!
As if we didn't have enough good characters in this... So they had evaded the British, hadn't they, to get to Egypt? They had invaded... The Royal Navy were basically chasing them.
So Nelson had been given orders to basically stop the Armada. And it's a vast Armada. I mean, it's 335 ships. It's hundreds of guns, cavalry, men. I mean, it's kind of almost up there with Xerxes' invasion. It's on a vast scale. And Nelson is just herring around trying to find it. And there's one kind of excruciating moment, I think, when they're pulling out of Malta, which Napoleon has captured. And the French can hear Nelson's ships kind of sounding cannon through the night, so that, the British squadron can keep track of each other, and they're just sailing silently so that Nelson won't know that they're going past. So Nelson is furious about this.
Tom, this is so Patrick O'Brien. I can't believe you don't like those books. So Jack, our producer, loves these books, and he, like me, is disgusted that you are rude about Patrick O'Brien and rope.
Well, it's too much. I've said this before. It's too much rope, but if it was just Nelson like that, I'd be all over that. But in the end, Nelson works out where Napoleon's fleet is, and it's been it's kind of been stationed in Abukir Bay, which is off Cairo in the mouth of the Nile. And the French fleet have moored there because there are very, very narrow shallows that they think no fleet could get round. And so essentially, were the British fleet to be able to go past these shallows, the flank of the French fleet would be terminally exposed. And that, of course, is exactly what Nelson does.
So Nelson divides his attack. Half go one way, half go... they cut off the French. So they're between the land and the French now. And it's about a 3-hour battle, I think, the Battle of the Nile. And the sort of high point of it is when Nelson himself, towards the end, is hit, isn't he? He's shot. And he's already lost one eye before. So he's hit quite... I mean, people say it's only a flesh wound, but it sounds quite bad. Like his skull is exposed.
And he had that famous line, didn't he, that before the battle, that I will gain either a peerage or Westminster Abbey.
Exactly.
So he's kind of ready to die. And it's interesting that in this battle there are quite a number of kind of echoes of the future story to come. So there's one Lieutenant Thomas Hardy, who has seized some Egyptian pilots who then are used to help negotiate the shoals. And there's also HMS Bellerophon, which is actually the British ship that gets most damaged. And it kind of ends up drifting off. And of course, Bellerophon in the long run is the ship that will pick up Napoleon, after Waterloo. And it's the cause of a famous poem, is it not?
Is it?
Yes.
I didn't know.
So L'Orient, the flagship that Napoleon had sailed on, the vast ship, and it gets pounded and pounded. It's got lots of gunpowder on, and it explodes. And the admiral of the ship, the commander of the ship, Casabianca, he dies there, and his son dies, and his son is standing on the deck and refuses to leave until he's been told by his father to leave. And so you get this famous poem, "The boy stood on the burning deck, whence all but he had fled. The flame that lit the battle's wreck shone round him the dead." And do you know Eric Morecambe's version of that?
I do not. I should.
"The boy stood on the burning deck, his lips were all a quiver. He gave a cough, his leg fell off and floated down the river."
Very nice. Very nice. Not a river, unfortunately, but there you go. So Nelson is hit. He's lost one eye already. A flap of skin falls down and obscures his other eye, so he can't see anything. He's very frightened. He shouts, "I'm killed, remember me to my wife." And then he's taken down.
Emma Hamilton.
Yeah, and the surgeon says, "Actually, you're fine. It's just a kind of, it looks bad. Yeah, man up. Get back up there, you snowflake." So back he goes up, and they win. But it's it's an absolute crushing victory. So almost all the French ships of the line, that's the big warships, are either captured or destroyed. It shatters the French fleet. There's a lovely detail afterwards. So Nelson is still quite blinded. He can't really see properly, so he's going around presenting gifts to the other captains and to people who distinguish themselves in the battle. And because he can't see, he gives a toothpick to a man who's had his teeth blown out. No. And to a man. Do you know what he gave a man whose nose had been shot off?
No.
He gave him a snuff box.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. Anyway, so Nelson recovers from that mishap. And basically, at that very moment, so the invasion is not very old, but at that moment, the French are doomed, really, from then, aren't they? Napoleon says, he's told what's happened, and he says, we no longer have a navy. Well, we'll have to stay here or leave as great men, just as the ancients did. Now, of course, people who listen to our Alexander podcast
yes, exactly.
will remember that Alexander had sent away his navy after invading Asia Minor.
Or indeed Cortés burning his ships.
Cortés burning his ships, exactly. So there is
he'd be aware of both those parallels.
Exactly. And he would almost, Napoleon being Napoleon, he would almost welcome this, because it would see it as a chance to prove his worth and valour. I
mean, I think one of the weird things about the Egypt exhibition is that it serves as an overture to Napoleon's campaigns in Europe. And of course, you get Trafalgar, where Nelson again destroys a French fleet. And Napoleon's reaction is to blaze off and win the Battle of Austerlitz. So I don't think that Napoleon feels that this is terminal. I mean, he's still ready to go the full Alexander. And that's basically what he does.
So he's in Cairo. He has strange Egyptian sort of festivities, doesn't he, where people are cheering him and Muhammad together. And
yes. Well, so the French fund celebrations for Muhammad's birthday.
That's
and
it. Yeah.
To celebrate, I think it's the seventh revolutionary year, which begins, I think, in September. They have a massive, great public celebration where they kind of raise a triumphal arch.
That's right, they do. Yeah,
and they kind of put revolutionary slogans and Quranic slogans on it. And they have a vast meal where everyone is supposed to sit down, so the Egyptians as well as the French. And next to the placemats, they include quotations from the Quran and the Declaration of Human Rights.
So strange.
Yeah, but I mean, that's where the French Republic basically still is. I mean, it's this idea that you can combine the French Revolution with, say, Islam, and that there's no kind of civilizational tension there.
But there is also this third element, isn't there, which is that it's sort of done as there's a bit of a Roman triumph. So they go through a triumphal arch. And it's a bit like the sort of triumphs that Mark Antony had organised in Alexandria. That sort of, he'd imported the Roman triumph when he was shacked up with Cleopatra.
Well, Napoleon has an affair, doesn't he, with a woman who he calls his Cleopatra.
His Cleopatra, exactly. And he's calling himself all kinds of things, isn't he? He's at one point he's been given the title Ali Bonaparte, which he's calling himself the favourite of Allah. I mean,
this is all this kind of cosplay.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly what it is.
But
it's basically he's a man in a computer game.
But again, so basically a month after this rights of man Quranic stuff, there's a rebellion in Cairo.
Yeah, so clearly no one in Cairo is kind of wearing this at all. It's absolute gibberish.
Napoleon's response is absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, he fires cannonballs at the Al-Azhar Mosque, which is, possibly the most significant mosque in the whole of Islam. I mean, it's...
Do you know what he says? They say that God will save us, and he says...
yeah, too late.
No, God is too late. God is too late. You have begun, now I will finish it.
Yeah. and he orders all the heads of the rebels to be piled up in a great square, and the corpses to be thrown in the Nile. And it's actually very, very kind of Battle of Algiers. And... again, this kind of the tension between the claims to a kind of universal enlightenment and brotherhood that the French Republic embodies, and the kind of willingness to repress very brutally people who oppose that, is a theme running from Napoleon right the way up to the Algerian Revolution.
Some people would say that's a theme, wouldn't they, of European colonialism?
It is.
That on the one hand, it's the sort of.
But I think with France, it's more ideological. I mean, in Britain, of course, they're blasting people out of cannons and all kinds of things, but they're not claiming at that point to embody Enlightenment ideals.
No, you're right.
And I think that's the kind of peculiar quality of tension you get with French imperialism.
Yeah,
right from the beginning.
So he does this. then we better sort of whiz through some of the rest of the campaign anyway, because he goes up to Syria, doesn't he? He decides he's going to reenact the Crusades. So even though he's been cut off, no fleet, all this, he thinks, well, I'll just keep going, basically, Alexander style, or I'll do a bit of Richard the Lionheart. So he captures Jaffa, doesn't he? And then he goes up to Acre, which satisfyingly for sort of John Bull types, Richard the Lionheart had captured. But Napoleon doesn't manage to capture it, does he? Because his troops will get plagued.
Well, to be fair, Richard the Lionheart had captured it together with Philip II of France. So we mustn't.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but and basically so it's held by the Ottomans. An Ottoman relief force comes down, gets defeated at the Battle of Mount Tabor, which is very significant for Christians. It's where the Transfiguration is supposed to have happened. But there's a British commander, Sidney Smith, who's the guy who had
at Toulon,
and essentially he forces Napoleon to retreat. So again, a kind of precursor of the retreat from Moscow.
Very
perhaps.
much. And even then, I think there must be a sense in some of the French soldiers' minds, rather anticipating what's going to happen in 10 or 11 years. They must be thinking, what the hell are we doing over here? I mean, what's going on? Why are we trudging through this? We're meant to be defending the French Revolution, and here we are kind of, basically in these biblical landscapes. They've all got dysentery and typhoid and stuff, haven't they? So it's just an absolute nightmare. Yeah.
And Napoleon has done this kind of, a bit like the kings would go in and touch people for the king's evil. He's gone into plague wards and, Diana style.
But there are conflicting claims about this, aren't there? Yeah. Some say he goes and embraces the soldiers and, is very, and others say he keeps a distance the whole time.
Yeah, yes.
He's masked up, basically.
So again, this whole kind of myth-making is so self-conscious. And he says that had Acre fallen, had Sidney Smith not spiked his destiny, he would have carried on. He would have made them into the immortals, he says. So the guards that guarded the Persian kings, the ancient Persian kings, and that he would have won a new battle of Isis, the battle that Alexander defeated the Persian king. So Napoleon's cross about that, but he didn't. So he had to go back, and that August 1799, he defeats another Ottoman invasion force at a second battle of Abukir Bay.
He does indeed.
And then he
held a triumph, by the which he got back to Cairo, which is very, very Mark Antony style behaviour. Like, I've just been defeated by the Parthians. The first thing
it's great news. Let's celebrate.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, he absolutely disgraces himself, doesn't he? Very un-Alexander behaviour, I have to say. He just runs away.
Well,
on his own.
He would say that he was going back to save France.
Yeah, that is what he said. He said, France is beleaguered, I must return immediately. Yeah. But he basically leaves everybody else behind. And he also tells them he's going to go off sailing around the Nile Delta. He says, I'm just going to go off on a little kind of weekend excursion.
I'm off. Yeah. Do you know the Jean-Baptiste Kléber, the general what he said about it?
Oh, I don't know what he said. What did he say?
I quote, "The bastard has shat his breeches full. When we get back to France, we will rub his face in his own shit."
Oh my gosh. Well, Kléber didn't get back to France, did he?
No, he didn't. Because in a kind of fascinating echo of current trends, he gets assassinated by what we'd perhaps now call a fundamentalist.
A guy who's actually Kurdish. So he's not even...
he's been studying at the Al-Azhar, so he's very ideologically motivated.
He's been radicalised and he...
And do you know what happens to him?
I do.
So tell the listeners what happens to him.
He is
horrible.
So his right hand is burned, isn't it? That's the right hand that wielded the dagger. But then he is killed by being impaled on a blunt stick. So to slow it down, they sort of jam him onto this, and his own weight
and they bury it in the soil. So he's kind of sitting there.
So he's kind of slowly sinking onto the stick, which kills him.
He makes not a sound.
I can't believe that. Would you?
No, because there are French observers who say this is incredibly impressive. This man never let out a cry, except then to kind of yell out "Allahu Akbar" at the end.
You know how long it took? 4 hours.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Who would stand there for 4 hours to watch this happening? I mean, spectator sports go. It's kind of dull.
Well, especially when you could watch hot air balloons or...
Yeah, exactly.
So when Kléber, after he's been assassinated by this poor guy, he then gets succeeded by a guy called Jacques-François Menou, who's an interesting figure. He's kind of pot-bellied, rather ramshackle, long-haired, dishevelled kind of figure. But what's interesting about him is that he's married an Egyptian woman and converted to Islam. So he stops being Jacques-François Menou and becomes Abdullah Menou.
Does he?
Yeah.
So that's like one of Alexander's sort of companions becoming a Persian satrap and going native.
And that's why Napoleon approves of it and thinks it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Napoleon really thinks this is
What happens to Monsieur Menou?
He goes back to France. I think he gets some kind of minor post and he ends up in a lunatic asylum.
Oh, God. Well, it's better than being impaled. So.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Okay, so that's the story of the Napoleonic expedition, which is kind of a defeat because the British move in and establish a political presence in Egypt. But the French have established a cultural presence. And perhaps that's what we should come to after the break.
All right. We'll see you after the ads.
This episode is brought to you by Rocket Money.
Tom, we often talk about how to organise our finances. I'm very conscious that I'm paying for a lot of mad subscriptions. And there's one thing that we've talked about often on this show. It's the thing that we probably hate more than any other, and it's a hidden fee. I would love to get my finances under control. There are all these things piling up on our bank statements, and I think I need to fix this problem. I need to sort this out and to stop this.
I mean, my finances are so chaotic that I need this app.
So I'll tell you what it is. It's called Rocket Money. It's a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending and it helps to lower your bills so that you can grow your savings.
With Rocket Money, you can track all of your subscriptions and you can easily cancel within the app with just a few taps, saving you time, avoiding charges. And you can also set budgets and goals and get personalized insights and regular reports to track how you're doing. They will even send you real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, refunds, and even low balances. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/ishistory.
That's rocketmoney.com/ishistory. rocketmoney.com/ishistory.
Hi, before we return to Napoleon in Egypt, regular listeners by now should be familiar with Unheard, UNHERD.com, which is the online magazine that's sponsoring the podcast and for whom both of us have written. Is that not so, Dominic?
It is. I'm about to start writing a piece for Unheard in the next few days.
What about?
I don't know if I can tell you because other commissioning editors will. It's about a subject that you will really enjoy.
Well, I look forward to that then. Okay.
Yeah, but I can't tell you what it is because other people will steal Unheard's brilliant ideas.
Okay, so if you want to find out about that and read lots of other quality writing, there's a special deal to Rest is History listeners, 3 months free subscription, which should be cancelled at any time, normally £1. Go to unheard.com/rest, and reminder, Unheard is UNHERD to claim it. And I'm very happy to be advertising it, particularly today when we're talking about Napoleon in Egypt, because I wrote an essay.
Yeah, it says a banger here, but I don't know what a banger is.
Well, it is a banger. It is a banger. So its title is The Age-Old Clash Between Islam and France. And the opening sentence, Dominic, in 1798, Napoleon embarked on the first French invasion of Egypt since the era of the Crusades.
Wow. So it's very timely, Tom. Did you write that knowing that we were doing the podcast, or was it a complete coincidence?
No, it was a while back in the aftermath of all the terrorist attacks.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, yes.
So it was about the Islamic State, why they particularly hated France more than perhaps even Britain or other European countries. When the Islamic State attacked the Bataclan and that terrible night, the message of responsibility they put out cited both the Crusades and, by implication, France's role as the revolutionary Enlightenment atheistical republic. And it's that kind of, the argument is that it's the fusion of those, the Christian and the revolutionary that particularly riles.
Right. And that tension is definitely still there, because Unheard have an article this week about the French presidential candidate or would-be candidate, Éric Zemmour. Have you been following him, Tom?
I have, the one who looks like Gollum.
Yes, he does look like Gollum.
Who came over to London
he's often described as being far right, isn't he? And some of his statements are quite...
he's a fan of Marshal Pétain, which I think qualifies you to be
I think that's, I wouldn't.
All right.
Marshal Pétain's not the French national hero that I would reach for, personally.
No, particularly since Eric Zemmour is Jewish. It seems very odd. But if you want to understand some of those complexities and paradoxes, and this was, again, an excellent kind of profile. They do wonderful profiles there. So do check it all out. unheard.com/rest, UNHERD. And now back to Napoleon in Egypt.
Bienvenue au Rest is History with me, Dominic Sandbrook, and Tom Holland. We are talking about Napoleon in Egypt. Tom, we had a lot of fun with the kind of campaign, but obviously the real significance of this is not so much military or kind of diplomatic. It is kind of intellectual and cultural, isn't it? So the savant, this is the moment that creates Egyptology. Is that right?
I think it is. So Napoleon, later in life, he would look back at the Egyptian campaign and he would mourn the fact that his dream of becoming Alexander had been frustrated. But he would say, in the long run, it doesn't matter, because the real conquests, the ones that leave behind no regrets, are those made over ignorance.
Oh my, we all know he didn't really mean that.
No, I think he was
shameless, absolutely shameless.
I think he was genuinely interested. So on the trip, the long trip from France to Egypt, he would host the various savants, and they would kind of discuss all this stuff.
So basically, until this point, Egypt has been very much terra incognita intellectually. Ancient Egypt, people, for example, nobody understands what hieroglyphics mean. They've tried to understand them. They think there's some kind of symbolic language, but they don't know what it is. And obviously it's on this trip that the French find built into the walls of a fort, I think.
There is a stone.
The stone, the key. Arguably one of the most important artifacts in all world history. Yeah,
so it's when Menu, the Abdullah, as he'd become by this point, and it's July 1799. So when there's kind of threat from British and Ottomans and so on, and they're rebuilding the walls around Rosetta, and they find this kind of black stone that has it's a trilingual announcement, and one of the announcements is in Greek. So they send it to Cairo, to this thing called the Institut d'Egypte, which has been set up, and it was set up in kind of August, almost 1798, so almost the moment that they get into Egypt.
And that's such an Enlightenment institution, isn't it? That's literally what it is. And it's kind of an intellectual institution. And
it stood there for years. It kind of got burnt down in the Arab Spring.
It did.
Very sad. But so they immediately recognise its absolute key significance. And they send it back up to Alexandria, ready to be taken back to France. And then when all the French forces surrender in 1801, one of the terms of the surrender is that they have to hand over their loot. So the British get it. So that's why.
Well, first, the French are very weaselly about that, aren't they? They hide a lot of their loot, and the British keep saying, "We know you've got more. What's in those crates, hidden away?"
But they know about the Rosetta Stone because the news of it has kind of gone around Europe like wildfire. And so the British, they definitely want it. So that's why it's ended up in the British Museum and not the Louvre. But what the French do have is that they have sent this expedition up the Nile to kind of chase the Mamluks, and the various savants have gone. And there's this incredible description of them arriving at Thebes, so Luxor, Valley of the Kings, this great monumental capital where bits of it are kind of still sticking out above the sand. And it's sufficiently impressive that when the French army arrived there, apparently they all spontaneously burst into applause at the sight.
I thought you were going to say they burst into tears. That would have been much more French behaviour.
I'm sure some of them did. And then they come back. So that's in January when of course the climate in Luxor is gorgeous. But they come back in the summer and reconnoitre the Valley of the Kings. So they're the first Europeans to do that. And it's so hot that 2 of them die of heat stroke.
Wow. But imagine what that's to be like, Tom. Now when you're a child, all children do ancient Egypt at school, and they're so conscious of mummies, of the tombs, of the pyramids. But imagine what that must have been like to have been the first people, to be, they're not the first Europeans, of course, they're nothing like it, but they arrive and many of them do not know what to expect, do they? The savant will have a sense that there's something there, but the ordinary soldiers, it must just be, if you're coming from, the the foothills of the Pyrenees or something, or the the wine growing villages of Burgundy. I mean, this just must be mind blowing to see.
And I think it is for the Savoy as well, because they're finding stuff that no European has seen before, and recording it, tracing it all down.
But that's what they do, isn't it? There's amazing books that they produce. The what's it called? The Description de l'Égypte, 1821,
yes.
4 volumes, I think. It's if you can get a copy, it's one of the most valuable books on the market, on the kind of antiquarian market.
It's stunning, and it's a kind of Wikipedia of Egypt. So it's not just the antiquities; it's how people dress, musical instruments they play,
and that's a very enlightening thing, isn't it? Napoleon has basically taken people and said, compile an encyclopedia of Egypt.
I suppose Edward Said would say it's a very colonialist project as well. It's about,
we can maybe come to him in a little. He would, of course.
But one of the reasons why the discovery of the antiquities has the impact it does is that it's not just Europeans who don't really know anything about it. The Egyptians don't either. The Egyptians, there was a stage where the Egyptians were interested in the pharaonic monuments, but that stage is long gone. And basically, they don't understand why anyone would be as interested in these antiquities as the French seem to be. And one of the measures of that is that, the Great Pyramid, the kind of primal symbol of pharaonic civilization, that the passageways that lead into it have become cluttered and impassable. And so Napoleon orders that in the first summer that he's in Egypt to be cleared. And he then he goes into the king's chamber where the body of Cheops was placed, and he orders everybody else out. And he sits there communing with his destiny. And he self-consciously models that on Alexander going to the oracle at Siwa. And he never revealed what he thought or what
was said. What happened?
Was
Nothing
said
happened.
by the mummy
Yeah.
But again, just such a kind of fabulously histrionic scene. So there's all that, and as we said, the British kind of claim the bragging rights politically. I mean, they establish a political protectorate over Egypt that in the long run, lasts right the way up to Suez, really, I guess. But the French established this sense that they are the people who have brought ancient Egypt back to life. And I guess that there are two things that really embed that. One of them, as you said, is the description of Egypt, which is commissioned by Napoleon just as he's leaving Egypt. And all these kind of various volumes come out, and they're still being produced even after Napoleon has been defeated and died. But the other thing is that there's a guy called Joseph Fourier, who's a mathematician, and he becomes the first president of the Institute in Cairo. And he goes with Napoleon on the skedaddle back to France, and he settles in Grenoble, and he has all kinds of antiquities around him. And growing up in Grenoble is a small boy called Jean-François Champollion.
Now, he's a huge figure, isn't he, in the understanding of Egypt? Because isn't it not him? Is he not the person who discovers how the Rosetta Stone works? Is that right?
He cracks the hieroglyphs. Yes, so he uses the texts from the Rosetta Stone basically to crack the hieroglyphs. And this is what then opens up the understanding of Egypt. And he goes back to Egypt, and he goes down the Nile, and he's probably the first person who can read the hieroglyphs since antiquity. Well, I mean, he is. I mean, it's kind of an amazing thought. But also what's kind of tantalizing is that he's probably also the last person to see Egypt as perhaps someone in late antiquity or the early Middle Ages would have seen it, because what's going on is that Egypt's been taken over by this Albanian adventurer called Mehmet Ali, who is
Muhammad Ali, he's an amazing character, isn't he? I mean,
he absolutely is, and he is he has no interest in antiquities at all, which is why
he's a modernizer.
He's perfectly happy for the British and the French to kind of engage in competitive antiquity rustling. So that's how, the statue of Ozymandias in the British Museum, loads of antiquities in the Louvre, that's how they get there. And those that don't get taken by European plunderers kind of just get smashed, used as, for lime kilns or whatever. So Champollion is the first to read hieroglyphs, and he's possibly the last to see the antiquities as they had been for centuries and centuries and centuries before Egypt really kind of explodes into modernization.
And the kind of irony, Tom, is that even as this stuff is being either taken away or destroyed in Egypt, there's this kind of Egyptomania all over the kind of Western world. So it's just a few decades later that you get the construction of, say, the Washington Monument to George Washington, which is done as an Egyptian obelisk, something that probably wouldn't have been done that way,
absolutely.
50 or 100 years ago. But because of the aftermath of Napoleon's invasion, there is this absolute kind of mad fascination with also, all things Egyptian.
And the obelisks being brought from Egypt, so Cleopatra's Needle to London, and so on, the one was taken to New York. Basically, every thrusting capital of a Western power has to have an obelisk. And I don't think you need to be Freud to work out maybe what's going on.
But that's also kind of a Roman thing, isn't it? Because after Octavian had defeated Cleopatra, the Romans started putting up obelisks to remind themselves of how they'd captured Egypt. And so that there's a sort of weird kind of classicism in that as well, isn't there?
Yeah. So the sense that the Greeks and the Romans had ruled Egypt, and now the Western powers should equally have a stake is definitely a part of what's going on. But conversely, just as people in Europe are getting obsessed by Egypt, the Egyptians are very, very conscious of basically just how technologically advanced the French had been relative to, say, the Mamluks. And one of the things that Muhammad Ali does is, as part of his process of modernization, is to send Egyptian savants to Paris. And there's this one guy, Rifat al-Tatawi, who wrote a brilliant account of his trip to Paris. And again, there's this sense of, as with Napoleon going to Egypt, the sense that he's struggling to get a handle on a very different way of seeing the world. So likewise with al-Tatawi, he describes France as a land of infidelity and obstinacy. One of their bad customs is their claim that the intellect of their philosophers and physicists is greater and more perceptive than that of prophets. And there's a French observer of these Egyptians who've come to Paris to study, and he says of them that the only things that they learned to do in Paris was to speak passable French, to drink wine, and to laugh at Mohammed.
Oh, really? So this is very kind of, is it the guy Qutb who went to America in the 1950s? Is that right? There's a kind of weird echo of that, isn't there?
Well, Tatawi is more enthusiastic. He comes back to Egypt and he founds a kind of a European language centre.
Right.
So that people can learn languages and kind of translate treatises and industrialize and improve agriculture and all that kind of stuff. So that's going on. But essentially it generates tensions within the traditional model of Islamic culture that are enduring to the present day. Because the thing is that up until Napoleon lands at Alexandria, basically nobody in the Muslim world had bothered with what the infidels were doing. And they just had no interest in them, couldn't care. And it's assumed that Islam is able to structure everything. And essentially the shock of realizing that is not the case. And how do you do that? Do you try and integrate Islam with the kind of the trends that Napoleon and then the other European powers embody? Do you reject them completely? I mean, what do you do? These are tensions that are enduring throughout the Islamic world, throughout the 19th and 20th century, into the 21st century. And of course, so there's one of the comments of Tatawi when he goes to Paris, he says there's not a single Muslim settled in Paris. I mean, that is clearly no longer the case. And so those arguments and those tensions have to be resolved by Muslims who are now living in France. But they also, and you can see that what's going on with the presidential election at the moment in France. These are issues that are now dominating mainstream French discourse as well.
And as you say, that it's a particular issue for France, isn't it? Because
I think it is, yeah.
France has that kind of sense that Napoleon himself had of the kind of secular, rational, enlightened, of Frenchness being bound up with secularism, with liberalism, which they, as you say, they think of that as something outside religion. But I have a terrible feeling, knowing you, that you will say that is actually a product of their Christian heritage. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm absolutely going to say that.
Of course you are.
I'm absolutely going to say that because it's clearly true. Because the French are exporting, deeply Christian assumptions about the possibility of church and state being separate entities. I mean, there's no equivalent to the phrase church and state in your fluent Arabic, as you'll.
Well, of course not. Tom, what about this? Edward Said business? So we should definitely. So for those people who don't know, Edward Said is this sort of Palestinian intellectual, 20th century, writing in sort of 1970s, 1980s. He wrote a book called Orientalism that was massively influential, but I think a lot of historians have said is utter bunkum.
Do you think it's utter bunkum?
Well, I don't think that you can make we all make mistakes, but I mean, to make...
I don't think it's utter bunkum.
I think when you've made so many mistakes...
I think the controlling idea that for the Europeans in the 19th century, of whom Napoleon's savants are the kind of archetype, the attempt to understand the countries that they were occupying was itself a part of colonial control. I mean, that seems to me indisputably true.
But however, Tom, that's also just common sense. I mean, that's just blindingly obvious. But to elaborate that into this grand theory...
I wouldn't say that, because I would also say that it's indicative of a curiosity that I think is rather admirable. So it takes time for the Egyptians to become interested in ancient Egypt. By the time that Tutankhamun is discovered, they're very interested in it. They're not going to let it all go off to London or whatever. But in the early decades of the 19th century, they're not interested in it at all. And it's the Europeans who are interested in it. And I feel grateful to the savants that they went and and often in many cases, they made illustrations, they made studies of monuments that no longer exist because they were demolished by the modernizing program of Mehmet Ali.
Yeah. Tom, I don't think anyone would surely... Well, I mean, you'd have to be very, very impassioned, I think, to disagree with that. I mean, obviously, their curiosity is one of the things that allowed these things to be preserved and that created Egyptology and that created a lot of these things. But also to see people, especially in the debased form of Edward Said's thesis, which is to see almost all Western intellectual engagement with the East as a product of colonialism and only about power and only about control and all this. I think that is, I mean... a guy called Robert Irwin wrote a brilliant book about Orientalism that was a complete riposte to Said, that kind of sowed his... just leveled his cities to the ground and said a lot of these people are actually themselves anti-imperialist, that they weren't necessarily great advocates of empire and all this kind of thing. And then actually...
but again, it's complicated, isn't it? Because Napoleon is saying, we're coming here to free you. We're coming here because we're against empires. We're against the British Empire. We're against the Ottoman Empire. But I think it's more complicated than that. I mean, I think there's a lot of I think Napoleon is... in a way that's perhaps typical of quite a lot of European figures in the early 19th century, simultaneously idealistic and deeply cynical. And the two seem kind of able to coexist in a way that perhaps we in the 21st century find difficult to understand.
Maybe. I mean, Napoleon, if you put him alongside the people he worshipped, Caesar, Alexander and so on, I think he actually makes complete sense, doesn't he? That blend of political opportunism and sort of genuine self-belief, but also a belief in his moral mission. I mean, those things are quite happily coexist.
But I think that we in the 21st century, for reflecting kind of the way that the culture wars rumble, we have a much more binary sense.
Yeah, we do.
That you're either an anti-imperialist or you're a colonialist.
Right.
In fact, both of those are equally European. I mean, they're equally Western. So it's not like...
Yeah.
And you see them intermixed in the figure of Napoleon. You see them intermixed in this whole extraordinary expedition. And I think that it is, one of the absolutely kind of foundational episodes in modern history, modern global history.
Because actually, when you think about European history, particularly before Napoleon, I mean, certainly in the sort of 17th, 18th century, the Ottoman Empire, the world of the Middle East, the engagement with Islam, they've slightly been pushed to the side, haven't they? I know there's the Siege of Vienna and all that kind of stuff. But for example, in Britain and in France, they're no longer really thinking about Christendom versus Islam in the 18th century, are they? And then after the invasion, that will be very different.
Yes. And I mean, you've kind of got this awakening of interest in Egypt. So as early as the 17th century, 1780 something, Leibniz, the philosopher and mathematician, is suggesting to Louis XIV that the French go and invade Egypt. And he's basically doing that to try and stop Louis XIV from invading Germany. But there's a kind of sense that Egypt is of interest. And then you've got this guy, the Comte de Volney, who's going to Egypt, drawing up that kind of sober report, but then he does a kind of very romantic portrayal of Egypt as a land of ruins and timelessness and things. So that's also kind of feeding into it. And I think that there is, and I guess that Edward Said maybe has a point here, that there's a sense perhaps in which lots of people in Europe are more interested in a kind of fantasy of ancient Egypt than they are in the reality of...
Yeah. But again, that's true of everything, right?
I think that is true. Yes, I think that is true.
We're always interested in a fantasy of something rather than the reality of it. I mean, that's just the way the human imagination works. Anyway, I think we haven't quite done this to death. I mean, there's tons more to say about it, but we should probably wrap this up.
Well, there's certainly tons more to say about Napoleon, isn't it? And this is the first episode we've done on Napoleon. A real gap. And I have to say that kind of getting back to this whole theme, just reminds me what an amazing figure he is, and Nelson as well, and lots to come.
Yeah, we've got to do Nelson, Tom.
We will see you soon. À bientôt. Bye-bye.
Au revoir.
Thanks for listening to The Rest is History. For bonus episodes, early access, ad-free listening, and access to our chat community, please sign up at restishistorypod.com. That's restishistorypod.com.